Hey everyone, today we'll talk about the trends that we are seeing across DevOps and data governance. What challenges do we see that can impede your DevOps, particularly from a data governance perspective? We'll also talk about how Salesforce Sandboxes play a crucial role in that, and what's the ideal process around it and its impact, the best practice to speed up your DevOps, and what can you go back and actually do. And Q&A. My name is Saurabh Gupta. A little bit about Cloud Compliance. We are a Salesforce App Exchange ISV partner, and everything we do is 100% on platform. We do sandbox data masking, but DataMasker product is the world's fastest on platform data masking. We do up to 99 million records in 24 hours. And it's available for free from App Exchange. You can mask unlimited number of records for 4 objects. We also do on-platform data retention. And again, 100% happening on Salesforce. Your data doesn't go anywhere. An App Exchange product. You can get more information about it on the link that. Turn it over to.
Hello everyone, I'm Varun. I have been working with CRM DevOps for close to around 12 years, and specifically Salesforce DevOps since past 5 to 6 years.
Any organization today that is going through a digital transformation effort, Salesforce is the engine that's driving it. Organizations understand that for their digital transformation to really happen, DevOps need to be an increased focus. And then there is data governance and the complexity of the amount of data across the systems, the nature of data continues to rise. Within that governance, data privacy and security continues to become more and more stringent. We've had GDPR, CCPA, CPRA, GPD in Brazil, India with PDPB, China with its own regulation, Canada, Australia, so on and so forth. It's a lot of reason for data governance to have a renewed focus on data privacy and security. So we'll talk a little bit more about how sandboxes serve as the building block for DevOps.
Varun, you need to decide what all environments do you actually need. It's a very critical part of the entire DevOps governance, and we need to understand what an ideal sandbox is. An ideal sandbox gives you a reflection of your production. It needs to be up to date with your sprints going in, with your releases going in. Your code is taken care of, but we miss on data. So eventually it goes out of sync. You have the metadata, but you don't have that data to support the functionality. And what will happen eventually? You are going to have a bug, let's say in production, and you will try replicating in a lower environment per se, a pre-prod, a full sandbox or something, but you won't be able to because you don't have that relevant data. And that's why it is very important to have your partial or full copy sandbox to be updated. There needs to be a proper refresh cycle for such orgs which are very critical. The sandbox needs to be usable. It needs to serve the purpose, whether it is development or integration or user acceptance or staging. It needs to serve the purpose, and for that it needs that set of data. It's pretty significant. Lastly, last but not the least, it needs to be secured. There's so much information onto it. 2, 3, 5 years down the line, there's a lot of data in Salesforce. Every refresh brings your production data directly into your sandbox, and our counterparts, vendors, everyone having access to those sandboxes, having production specific data, which is very risky. So security is a big aspect for the sandbox and the purpose which is serving.
True. Every time I talk to customers, this keeps on coming up. From a DevOps perspective, Sandbox is the Lego block, but there is a key business aspect of what the expectation is from Sandbox in line with being usable, it's updated, it's complying with your security IT policies, and it's in line with governance. So the second part of this, which is around governance, right? If you think about the building blocks for governance, a key component of it is data security and privacy. And what you see are some numbers that are pretty interesting. 3.9 million euros or about $4.2 million is the average data breach cost in 2021. And this is the highest in 17 years. So you can see this constantly rising up. A vast majority of customers today, right, are not certain that the brands that they interact with will use their data judiciously, right? 97%, that's a significantly large number. And in the EU, the regulators have been busy at work with 1.1 billion plus of fines on privacy violations and data breaches and emails that went out to people who didn't consent to receive emails. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that's happening. And what you're seeing is, on one hand, we are trying to accelerate with this DevOps journey and bring to the fore new features faster, automated testing, all of that. And on the other hand, is this whole set of stuff that's sort of lagging behind most enterprises on the governance front. And there is not enough of a lockstep between, your DevOps and your data governance. And that is kind of the key insight that we found as we engaged with a lot of customers, that your customer data is on fire. These things that are happening, even minor infractions and issues, are affecting brand trust.
I just want to add one thing, because we see these figures, and I just want to put it out there. Like, we being, maybe I'm working in the admin capacity or developer capacity or DevOps capacity, and this is something which, business kind of faces such challenges, but we think like there's nothing much that we can maybe contribute, because that's how business is. That's how, okay, they have given the access, but we all can contribute within our capacities to help our organization save, save, save it. So that's, I just want to put it out there that it is everyone's responsibility. It's not just one's response. Yeah.
And so, as we were mentioning, right, like in line with that, if you think about production today, most organizations, this is probably much, much more truer, at least from my perspective, with large and mid-sized organizations. There is a ton of data. You see companies, if they've had Salesforce for 12 years, guess how long of data they have. And there is a challenge with this, right? This obsolete data is slowing everything down, right? Not only is it impacting your reports or dashboards or other things, or finding things are harder in production, it has a multiplier effect. So if you have a bunch of full copy or partial copy sandbox, this data is permeating there. The other part of this is, as we'll see further into this is adding hours and days of delay into your DevOps, because as you look at sandbox prep, you find that this is becoming a challenge. Most companies that have DevOps and who have invested in automation want to deploy want to go through release cycles in like a bi-weekly or a monthly or, once in 2 months time frame. But their sandboxes are not able to keep up because you have such a large amount of data bloat. The other part of this is this data bloat is also a regulatory issue within GDPR, within CPRA, which is the Californian law that gets into effect 1st of January 23. You cannot have data that is just unlimited amount, right? You have to have a retention policy and need to make sure that this is in line with that retention policy. So with that, I'm going to switch over and talk a little bit about how it's affecting your release velocity. Actually, I'm going to turn over to you, Varun. Do you want to talk about this before we go forward?
Yeah, definitely. Because what happens is, I have in my release pipeline, and I'm just focused, I'm gathering business requirements, creating user stories, and maybe in the middle of it quiet. And why? So because it doesn't have a good data, we decide on, okay, that needs to be refreshed. And then we take a call, and which again may lead to a week or two delay there. So because we didn't had it planned, maybe someone did a refresh 1 year back and no one knows how the process is. And the as you suggested, that eventually the data grows in our production, and a single refresh may take ages. So large set of data contributes a lot to my refresh process. And another thing is that there is not that much of integration between my completion of a refresh process and a trigger of data masking, because that is more or less manual, and which keeps, maybe we trigger something 3 p.m. today, any time zone, and then we take a look on it, because nothing happens automatically, and we take the next step, maybe data masking next day morning. So there's a whole lot of delay, and you could have in the morning you could have seen a completed data masking operation if you could have opted for automation. Next, lastly, the automations when on the business processes needs to be limited. We are changing our production references onto the lower sandboxes and we are using automation, it should not trigger business processes that because that can, so this all these parameters deep down, if you think about it, they slow down your velocity because they slow down the process of delivering and validating.
And I think what you'll see in the next slide is a real world use case. So we worked with this really large customer, and these are some things we found there. And it really took a lot of this is what has inspired this whole conversation and this thinking. This is an older org, some 15 years old. They have 100 million plus records in contact lead account, some of the key objects that they care about. And because of a very large number of record set and just a sheer number of app exchange package and old, heavily customized org, it takes them upwards of 7 days just to refresh, from production to create a full copy sandbox. That's how long they're spending. And then they spend more than a week trying to mask that data. They're using a non-platform solution, not us. And so they were just waiting for 2 weeks for just this much to happen. And then, they have post-refresh settings. So, if you have CPQ, if you have e-commerce, if you have a lot of complexity, you have a lot of remote site settings that you need to update in your dev environment every time it is refreshed, because you don't want your full copy sandbox to call a production e-commerce system, a production finance system, a production NetSuite or something. You want to update those URL and point them to the sandbox of NetSuite and so on and so forth. So they're spending a couple of days there, and they have admins who are doing this every time it is refreshed, because you don't want your full copy sandbox to call a production e-commerce system, a production finance system, a production NetSuite or something. You want to update those URL and point them to the sandbox of NetSuite and so on and so forth. So they're spending a couple of days there, and they have admins who are doing this Jira Confluence list of tasks that they have to manually go and do it. And so because of all of this, it takes them upwards of 2+ weeks to just get their sandbox ready. And this is so long for them that they're only refreshing once a year. And this is not atypical. Like, I have seen a lot of customers, big and small, where their sandbox refresh maybe happens once in a quarter, but most of the times it's once every 6 months. And that's a problem because now, you're testing new feature set every month, every new release that's coming out, you're testing on at least 6 months to maybe 11 months old data. So a lot of scale-based type testing, a lot of testing against real referential data is just not happening. So there's a lot of challenges like these, because of which their entire DevOps was slowing down. And from a data governance perspective, this is a huge risk that they really don't like. They don't want this stuff to be unmasked. They want to make sure that nobody makes manual errors there. So I'm going to switch over and show a little bit of what we found as the optimal way of addressing these kind of things. And what you see here is this entire flow of what needs to happen in production, what needs to happen in sandbox, and how does DevOps play a role in this, right? So what you see up here, these two circles is your production, right? In production, what you want to do is you want to automate your data retention. So you may have retention policies where you would say, for example, that any contact that we don't have any interaction with for 6 years, we want to delete them or we want to mask them. You have retention policies like that, right? Cases that are older than 10 years, so on and so forth. And what you want to do is you want to identify this subset of data, and then you want to automate its masking and deleting. And those are things that we do obviously on platform, or you could do it with some of the solution. But you want to make sure that you have retention to reduce the amount of obsolete data that's going over. And then you want to trigger data masking on it when it gets to sandbox. So when your sandboxes are created, or you can trigger from these DevOps tool, whatever you're using, you can trigger data masking. So our products and for data masking, DataMasker, that can be triggered from GitLab, years, slow some, what have you. So you can use any of that. That will make a REST API call, and you can start masking. And as part of that masking, you can choose to delete files and attachments, because a number of times they have a lot of data that may be very sensitive that we can't see. So you want to delete that. You want to mask all your objects which have sensitive data. So it's contacts, leads, quotes, orders, who do you sell to, how much do you sell for, all of that stuff. And all of this can be automated, and your DevOps can then run very lockstep with that. That is kind of the broader purview of this. And I'm going to turn it over to Varun on talking about how this has reduced.
The first thing, setting up the retention rules, configuration policy. In case you don't have any retention policy, but as a region, as a country, there would be certain norms, some policies that you have to abide by for data retention. Anyone who's working in a greenfield project should be a part of your architectural sync up or whatever you're having as a kickoff. That's the primary goal, reducing your obsolete product data, not having anything stale in your production, which will help speed up the refresh of processes and save your storage. This helps you abide the privacy laws within the region. Another simple tip: next time you're refreshing maybe your full copy SAN chatter related data, because that simply slows down your refresh process and nothing much. You may not need it in your lower environment. So that approximately going to contribute 40% faster refresh process at the backend.
Yeah, particularly this field history and chatter is like a no-brainer. You can do that really easily. If you don't have, use sandbox templates every time you're doing a refresh, you don't want to copy this. This adds a lot of, here is a sample of how on-platform data retention looks like. This is our product, and you can use it on platform with very specific, filters to determine what kind of information do you want to mask it or obfuscate it, do you want to delete it, and you can run this, we run this daily or weekly or monthly, depending on our customers. And essentially, we will make sure that all the information is suitably, data retained. This is the second part of this, which is around data masking. And one of the things we do is on platform masking, and it is dramatically faster. So we mask about 3.5 million records an hour. So if you have a large org, or even if a smaller org, you can get this masked really, really quickly. You can reduce any accidents, accidental email blasts that may happen, because we mute all of the automation when we are doing this. And with data masking, with DataMasker, you can get it for free from App Exchange. You can mask unlimited records across any 4 objects that you like. And it just takes a 45-minute setup. We can, you can set up a call with us, and we can help you just get up and running in 45 minutes. So it is a really interesting product. We are finding a lot of traction with customers. And to me, the thing is, it's a no-brainer to use something where you don't have to pay. You don't have to spend weeks or months trying to set this thing up. I'm going to turn up. Varun, do you have anything quick to add? Because I know we are running a bit short on time.
We are good here. With this part is any DevOps platform can trigger it automatically. So that's the best.
Great point. Absolutely, yes. So, and there is a link that my colleague just shared. You can actually click on this and watch a demo of how Copado can turn DataMasker on and how it can automate your data masking. It's a 3-minute video. And if you want to get this product, you can go on App Exchange and find it, or you can download it from this link. There is a view of how that looks. It's a very declarative design UI, right? So you do a sandbox configuration, you specify what objects, you specify what filter criteria you want to apply, and you can mask. And then for every object, it has like a field level mapping where you can tell it to apply more detailed masking. So you can be very, very specific. You can do it unlimited records. So you can mask millions of records with it if you like. And that brings us to the third part of this, which is really automating all of those activities. So if you have remote site settings, if you have custom labels, you can, avoid manually updating them. The other thing we do is you can, if you have power users that once your sandbox is ready, you want to go in and manually remove their .invalid, you don't have to do it. We can actually do it. So when you're setting this up in your masking, you can specify, what post-refresh settings you want to update, what remote site custom labels, and who are the folks to remove .invalid for. So we will process all of this and automatically remove the .invalid. Here is a view of how that looks like. So for post-refresh, this is an example of remote site setting where you just put the name, you put the updated URL that we are going to be changing it to. And then once the masking is done, we would automatically update your remote sites, custom labels, and all of that good stuff. So really, we talked about a lot of things, and we have a few minutes. This is our closing slide. What can you do? Everything you've heard, there is a couple of things you can literally do right after this call. You can, take a look at DataMasker on App Exchange. If you would like to kind of get it up and running, we can, set you up. My colleague will share a link on a meeting that you can schedule with us. It's also on App Exchange. And you can, if you use a DevOps tool today, you can definitely wire it up with DataMasker, and that way you can automate this so that all of this runs together, and you can automate your manual sandbox task. These items here are all sandbox oriented. If you are an admin, if you are a developer, you could literally do this. I get the second part of this, which is data retention and prod, can be a larger initiative. It's data in production, so everybody I know takes this extremely seriously. This is a longer project for them, but this is another thing that we do pretty well, and we have a lot of large customers who use it. So if you are interested in this, definitely reach out to us, and we'd be happy to give you more information on it. This is also an App Exchange product. You can take a look at that. You can also go to our website and take a look at any of these products, get more information about it, watch their demos. All of our pricing is also on our website. We're very transparent about it, so all of that is available. So with this, I'm going to turn over to Varun to see if he has anything to add, and then we'll take a look at Q&A. If anybody has questions, please do ask in chat, or I think you should be able to unmute yourself. I'll just do that.
There's a close relationship between your DevOps processes and your data governance. If we don't take care of it, it definitely reduces the velocity and the number of items that you have planned. So go out there and assess today whether you need it. Maybe you don't because you have a small setup, but the assessment is very important.
I'm going to look through the chat and see if there are questions. So I think someone asked about pricing. You could go to cloudcompliance.app and you can take a look at our pricing. All of our pricing is here, so you can definitely look at that. And I'd also appreciate if there's any feedback that you have, then tell us. Was this useful?